Alright, so here's a little brief tutorial on just kind of the basics of editing in Adobe Lightroom. So right here I've got my picture that I decided to edit. Took this on my roof. I'm gonna open this up in Lightroom. So it might be a little differently arranged on Android, I'm not sure. But okay, so we've got the picture in here. Now, if you're maybe check the camera settings on your phone, it may have the ability to shoot in RAW format. You're gonna wanna do that if it's possible. Okay, so down here at the bottom of the screen, you've got all these options on what you can do. Okay, so I'll kind of go through the order of things that I like to do. So first, always good to straighten out your picture. Okay, so you'll get a little grid, and you want to make the picture roughly straight with the horizon. This one actually is already pretty good. It's a little hard with mountains sometimes. Okay, so if you ever wanted healing, the healing brush, it's down here. That can remove acne and stuff. And I'll just kind of show you like on a cloud. So you can draw on an area and then it will replace that with an area that it thinks is a similar color and tone, but you can drag that second area around or drag your first area. Now obviously this isn't really meant for clouds. That's just something you can do. Clone stamp is something similar, it just works with a little different algorithm. The clone stamp is the one under this brush. So clone stamp is more like aggressive. Okay. All right, so after I do the crop, what I like to do is hit auto. Okay. Now auto won't always be good, but most of the time it's pretty good. It's gonna give you a pretty good, it'll adjust the kind of shadows and the brightness and everything. In this case, it was already pretty balanced, so it didn't do a whole lot. If you look at the before and after, just minor changes. Okay. Then I like to go into light down at the bottom. So they also have all these presets. I normally don't use those because I kind of like the fun in it, but a lot of people do. Nothing wrong with that. I just like the fun in making my own. So I go down to light. Usually I don't touch exposure too much because it's very aggressive. Okay, so you don't really need to mess with that. Auto will do a pretty good job getting your correct exposure. I go to contrast. I turn it up somewhere. It depends on your picture and how dark and stuff it is. Somewhere. So if it's with people, you can't put it as much. But for landscapes and stuff like this, I like it somewhere around 40 to 60. Some pictures you can go even a little higher. Most stuff you're not going to want to take all the way to 100. Okay. It's a little too much. We'll put this one on 60. Okay, but notice the trees got a little darker. Okay, and this is where the light editing is very powerful in that you see we've got highlights here. Okay, so that's only gonna lighten and darken the bright spots of the picture. We've got shadows, which does the opposite. So see, I can bring my shadows up, bring up these trees without washing out the sky. Or maybe I want a dark background. This is where you start getting into a lot of creative flexibility. I think for this one, I'm going to go a little darker for the background. Get this kind of silhouette effect. So whites is all the whites in the image. Blacks is going to be all the blacks. So if I wanted to make this even a little bit darker, I can do that as well. So these I often will turn all the way to 100 if necessary. So all of these, like, there's so much personal opinion in it. I mean, maybe you want it really bright and vibrant, and there's stuff you can do with that. Just for this one, I'm deciding to go for a dark one. I often find that turning down the highlights, if you've got a picture of the sky, will make the sky better. Even if it's a little dark at first, you can brighten it up in a little bit. Okay, so color. This is going to be your color balance here, this orange to blue. Okay, obviously you would never want to bring it this much. Okay, the auto setting will do this kind of automatically, and we'll try to find a good balance for you. But some people like a little cooler colored picture, more blue. Well, some people may want a little bit warmer color, which is more yellow. I'm going to leave this on auto for now. Usually I'll come back and adjust that after I start messing with some of the other settings. So if Vibrance is sort of like, you may have seen saturation sliders before, okay, on photos. And it may be tempting at first to crank saturation up, but this starts to look really fake, and most people will notice that it looks really fake. So if you want a little more color pop in your picture, the better option is to go with Vibrance. Okay, so Vibrance emphasizes some colors without oversaturating others. Okay, but often too, like let's say I want this orange to pop, but I don't want the sky to pop. Okay, like that sky looks a little too fake for me. Okay, what you can do, you go up to the top here, the top of this bottom menu, and you go into mix. Okay, in mix, you see you have all these colors that you can individually control their saturation. Okay, see this is red up and down. Okay, that's not really the color I want to be targeting. But let's say I did. You can also control the luminance, which is the brightness. So you can see how this area of color mixing is a very powerful tool to really custom tailor the colors for what kind of feel you're going for in the image, whether it's however you felt there, or whether it's a certain type of artistic style you're going for. So let's say I want a little more orange in this. Okay, that's probably a little too much. Maybe we'll just bring it right about here. Okay, but I don't want this sky to be so blue, so I can go up here to the blue. I find that there's two blues. I find this blue is more represents the sky, and I can turn that down a smidge, so you can go all the way down. I just want it down a little bit, something like that. Okay, so sometimes I'll also just see what changing the luminance will look like. Normally luminance, that bottom slider is not super useful, at least for what I tend to do. Maybe I want a little more yellow. This gives me some of that gold color on the clouds there. And maybe just a hint of purple. Got to be careful with the purple. Okay. So now if we look at our before and after, we're already starting to really make this picture have a really nice feel to it. And this was a really nice, like, magical sunset. I'm trying to capture that without making it too fake. Okay, so back to our color tab. Okay, so I'm okay with those colors for now. They are a little aggressive, but it just depends on what you want. I find that coming back to the picture after maybe an hour or like the next day, you can kind of recognize right away, like, oh, okay, I went a little too overboard with this. So this is a great tip I recommend. Don't finish the picture in one day. Okay. Also down at the bottom here, something I like to do when I start, which I forgot. You hit the optics tab down at the bottom, remove chromatic aberration, and enable lens correction. That just kind of smooths out certain features that your camera lens will put in unnecessarily. Okay. So now we're going to get into a little selective editing. Okay. So that's down at the bottom, very first one over here. Okay, so you've got 3 selective options. This is where it can start to really get time consuming to edit these pictures, but if you want to edit a couple really good, this is where you can really custom edit it, okay? So you got three options. So basically what this is doing is applying an edit only over a certain area of the picture. So up at the top left, you've got a paintbrush. Okay, so that will paint over something like this. And then let's say I want to make that brighter. Well, that's way too bright. But let's say I wanted to, do whatever to this area. Like let's say I just wanted to target one tree or something, right? You can do stuff with this and you have pretty much all of the same editing things that we were just doing. Okay. That you can do just to a specific area. All right. So paintbrush is a fine way to do it. You can really zoom in and just target certain areas, but you do have to be careful because it's very hard to get the brush right to the edge. And if you don't get it right to the edge, like let's say I wanted to brighten this tree, but now see I didn't get it right to the edge, so there's that little white over the sky. So that's just an example. I wouldn't obviously want to brighten this tree because I made it dark on purpose. Okay, now over on the left, so once you're editing it, you can click on this blue dot and this menu should pop up over here. So you've got your brush, your eraser, this first little dot, that's the size. Okay, and then this second little hazy looking dot, this is the feather. Okay, so what this does, feather is like, it tells it where to cut off. So see, just look at the paintbrush. This is a very sharply defined brush, but this is a gradual curve. So normally feathering it more, depending on what you're trying to outline, is going to be better. Okay, so that's the basics of brush selective editing. You've also got up at the top left here, when you're in the selective menu, you've got this little circle one. Okay, so that's something like this. And you've got kind of all the same effects. You've got the feather effect over on the left. You can erase a certain part of this circle maybe. And you've got, didn't mean to delete that. Okay, you can also hit above the trash can on the left. You can hit this button and it reverses it. I wish you could do this with more of the selective ones. You can't do that with the brush, and sometimes it would be very useful to do that, but you can't. So let's say I want to do everything but this tree. Okay, and you can drag this circle, resize it. That's going to apply an edit to everything in the red. Okay. All right. And now, probably the most useful one, the one I use the most in these types of pictures, is up at the top left, the one that looks like a square. Okay, so you're going to want to just click, okay, and that'll gives you a straight line. And I don't know why it turns so much, it's really annoying, but okay, you can turn it and you can drag it down, and that increases the area that the effect gets feathered over. Okay, so normally for something like this, I'm going to want to make it a little bit small. So it's always better to have a feather versus a sharp line. Okay. So now I've got an effect that's only going to apply to the sky and not the background. Now, if I wanted to make it more precise, I can go in here and sort of erase the tree. Maybe I don't want this really applying over the tree. Okay, I'm not going to kind of really finely tune this, but I actually think I'll have it apply over the tree for now. The tree's pretty dark, so it should be fine. Okay, so now I've got this selective area, and down at the bottom, now I can apply edits. Okay, now if you click on effects, this is really one of the best features of Adobe Lightroom that makes it really good is these three effects right here. Okay, so we've got texture, clarity, and dehaze. Okay, these are all AI algorithm things that apply to your picture that make it look really nice. Okay, so let's add dehaze. Dehaze, you want to be a little careful with because it'll kind of over contrast it. Okay, like we don't want this. But it basically, in these hazy parts of the image, it adds more contrast to it. So this isn't that hazy of a picture, but you'll find that kind of like cloudy or muggy pictures, this works really, really good on. Or like pictures from an airplane. Okay, so I can apply this a bit. And remember, this is only applying to this top area of the picture. Since my bottom's dark, it wouldn't really matter if I applied it to the bottom as well. But many pictures, if you have a dramatic sky and then, it's a light background, you don't want to apply this dehaze to the light background, because you can apply this to the whole picture. You don't have to do it selectively, but you don't want to apply it to the dark background or the light foreground, because it'll make your picture look too contrasty. Okay, so I can apply a little dehaze. Okay, now clarity, what that does is it sort of increases the local contrast, okay, and makes it look, I don't really know how to describe it, but you can kind of see it here. It gives just more like dramatic-y feels to it. Okay, now texture, I'll zoom in for the texture one. Texture is sort of like a normal picture editing this, and you have it here. There's this effect called sharpening. Okay, and sharpening makes the pixels sharper. Okay, but in many cases, you don't really want to use traditional sharpening because it makes it look kind of fake. I mean, just look at these clouds right here compared to how they were taken. And in some cases, you may want a really sharp picture. It actually doesn't look too bad in the sky normally. So you can always play around with sharpening, and then there's also, this is in the detail tab down at the bottom. But back to effects, texture is like sharpening, but it uses advanced algorithms to be less aggressive. Okay. But texture will give you exactly what it says, texture to your picture. And you can also remove texture, which a lot of times looks cool for clouds and skies. And I find myself doing this more and more, is I will turn my texture all the way down. So this is where we started. It takes a second to load. Turn my texture down, and I'll turn my clarity up a little more. And this gives this sort of soft, kind of dramatic-y sky. But again, with all this stuff, there's lots of different ways you can go about it. You can also kind of put both texture and clarity, around 40 to 60, and that'll give you something like this. Clarity up to the max is normally a little too much. I wouldn't do that in most cases. Clarity I don't like to bring past 60 or 70. It is personal preference. Texture, I find you can bring it all the way up or all the way down, and it's okay. Okay, so it's always a good idea to see the before and after. You can't do it when you're in this selective menu down at the bottom, but if you exit out of this, back to the main menu at the bottom, if you just click and hold the picture, you can see the before and after. Okay, so you can see we're starting to get a pretty cool wall-worthy, if I do say so myself, picture out of this picture that I just snapped on my roof. Okay, so always if you want to go back and change your selective edits, like change whatever setting you have, you can click selective at the bottom, and that little gray dot, just click on it. And so let's say you had multiple. Let's say I had another selective one up there. I can cycle between these two by just pressing the dot. Okay. So back in our selective edit, this is looking, I just kind of wanted to compare. So all right, let's say this is a useful thing to do. Let's say you want to compare what texture all the way up and texture all the way down looks like in this particular picture. Okay, so I applied it all the way down. Now at the bottom menu, you can scroll all the way over to versions, okay? You see that versions down at the bottom? You can hit versions and create a version up there at the top, okay? I'm gonna say texture down. Okay. Now let's go back to our selective. Turn our texture all the way up. We're going to create one that says texture up, because a lot of these more advanced effects, they take time to render, so it's hard to, if you just drag the slider, you can't kind of switch back and forth and really see what the picture looks like. But some people create lots and lots of these versions to compare very closely what different things are doing. Okay, so let's see, our texture all the way down, texture all the way up. So I actually think in this case, I want my texture down. I like the look of this, the soft feel with the dark foreground. I think it's a nice look. So now we're kind of getting to the point where I'm pretty happy with the initial results of this picture. And I'm not sure how long it took us here, but yeah, now it's going to be pretty much just fine tuning things. And again, I'll probably, if this was a picture I was really seriously editing, I would come back to this multiple times over multiple days, and just getting a fresh set of eyes after going to sleep or whatever. You may wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, this is way too orange. What was I thinking? Or this is way too soft. Or maybe I want to change this or that. So that's the great thing about Lightroom, is that you can go back and change your edits at any time. And so I can just kind of show you a few of the kind of dramatic pictures I've done, or the dramatic differences. So here's our before. And again, it didn't look quite this dull in real life. This is shot in raw mode, so the colors are going to be washed. And this is my after. Okay, so you can see this one I spent a long time on, but you can see kind of what you can do with this. Even some astrophotography, which is hard on phones, but let's get a portrait here. So portraits are a totally different type of editing. I'm not going to go into that right now. Some dramatic skies. And you can also do selective black and white things, which is what I kind of did here. I made most of it black and white, but I brought out just a few colors. This is just some examples if you're still watching at this point. To see something like this, the next day I actually came back, I was like, oh, this is way too much color here. This is not really what it looked like. So I changed it. Let's see if there's any other good ones. So this is a good one. So we got, I tried to kind of just bring out the tint and the trees and the stars up here in the background, which you can do in this program. You can give a lot more stars pop depending on your phone. And there's more basic stuff that I'll do. Oh, and one last thing here. So we kind of did a lot to this picture, but if I do have certain presets that profiles, so if you go down here to the bottom, profiles that I will apply at to different things. So you can save, let's see. I don't know where mine went. Oh, I'm sorry. Presets, there we go. Okay, they moved the menu around, must have updated it. Okay, so you go to the bottom menu, right next to crop, presets, and you can go up to the top, the three little dots, and hit create a preset. Okay, and I can name this Sky Dramatic or whatever you want. And then I'll save it to a preset, and then you can go to your library, go down, scroll to the bottom, use your presets, and you see I already have some saved that I could apply to my picture that I named different things. But I don't use presets a whole lot. I probably should utilize them more. If you're editing a lot of pictures, I think it can be pretty fast. But I will use it, like let's say I took, like I got one here, Lake Mead. Say I took like 30 pictures at Lake Mead, where I can just save the preset and apply it to all 30. So I don't have to keep doing this. But yeah, that's about it. Oh, and once you get done with your picture, you just hit the little share button at the top, and you could say export to camera roll. And your picture will now appear in your camera roll. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good result here. Oh, one thing you can do with Clone Stamp under the Healing tab. Let's say I wanted to get rid of this this power line right here. Okay, you can hit the Clone Stamp underneath the Band-Aid. Okay, I can draw this here. Okay, and you see how it does that? Oh, wait, okay. So that's, see how it's like too obvious? You hit the feather button, which is under the Clone Stamp button. Oh wait, 2 under this white dot. And I can turn my feather up more. So now it's less obvious. But you can also select where is it grabbing this from. This takes a little more time to get it to look right, but you know, if you really wanted it to be a bomb picture, you can remove really whatever you want from the picture. Okay, well hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming for a first tutorial. I don't really know how long I talked, but hopefully it helps, buddy. See ya.